Priming your gunpla is a must before painting. Let me guess, you've heard that before. But then the doubt creeps in, like, what if the primer is too thick that it hides all those gorgeous details? Or worse, what if the primer doesn't stick to the plastic at all? And let's be real, priming your gunpla can be downright intimidating. So if any of that sounds familiar, you're not alone. But here's the thing, priming is not the scary monster it's made out to be. It's a game changer for better adhesion, smoother finishes, and durability. Oh, and by the way, I made a video on what to do before priming. Things like washing the parts and sanding away knob marks. So if you haven't seen that yet, I recommend checking it out first. It will give you a solid foundation to build on. I'll leave the link in the description below. Oh, and before we get started, I want to give a huge thanks to Spray Gunner for making this video possible. They sent me this amazing airbrush which I'll be using for today's demo. And if you're looking to upgrade your gear, check out my affiliate link in the description below. Now, I know not everyone has access to an airbrush or can use spray cans due to space or weather limitations. And if that's you, the only alternative would be brush-on primer. But we'll save that for a separate video. For now, we'll focus on airbrushing and spray can priming. Now, let's start the priming process. Whether you're just starting out or looking to perfect your technique, keep on watching. This video will change the way you see priming forever. Primer is essentially the foundation of any painted model. Primer uses a resin binder that leaves a very porous, rough surface at the micro level. This rough finish is what allows regular paint to stick much better to the model. So primer uses a few important purposes. First, better paint adhesion. So primer creates a surface that paints can stick to more effectively. Without primer, paint might peel off or chip easily. So a primed gunpla is more resistant to scratches, meaning your finish is way more durable. Second, uniform base color. Primers help even out the color of your kit, giving you a consistent base for your paint job. And third, revealing imperfections. So one of the underrated uses of primer is that it helps reveal imperfections, so you can fix them before applying paint. In short, using a primer is not just an optional step. It's essential if you want your gunpla to have a clean, professional finish that lasts. Whether you're airbrushing, hand painting, or using spray cans, priming is the first and most important step in the process. Skipping primer might save you time, sure, but you likely sacrifice durability and finish quality. There are 3 ways to prime gunpla: spray cans, brush-on, and airbrush primers. In this video, we'll focus on the 2 most popular methods, using spray cans and using an airbrush. So let's start with spray can primers. These are a great option if you don't have an airbrush setup. They are beginner-friendly and accessible. Just shake the can and you're ready to go. However, the spray of spray cans can be harder to control. And if you paint a lot of gunpla, they can get expensive. There are 2 types, hobby grade and industrial grade. Hobby grade primers like Mr. Surfacer are designed specifically for models. They have finer nozzles and thinner consistency, giving you smooth coverage, perfect for small details. The downside though, they can be very expensive. On the other hand, industrial grade primers are cheaper and readily available at hardware stores. While they're not specifically made for models, they can still work well if you're careful. For this video, I'll be using an industrial grade primer, so you can see how to make it work for gunpla. Let's go over how to apply it. So first things first, shake the can for at least a minute. And of course, keep a distance of at least 2 to 4 inches from the part, or whatever it is you're painting. Spray in short controlled bursts, moving the can side to side, or up and down. Never hold the spray in one spot, as it can cause pooling or uneven layers. And start spraying before the part and stop after to avoid spattering at the edges. Much like with airbrushing, in spray cans, you should also apply light, even coats. It's better to do multiple thin layers than one thick coat, which can obscure details. Since spray cans are messy and emit strong fumes, it's important to use them in a safe and well-ventilated area. While I do have a spray booth, I prefer using spray cans outdoors. It gives me more freedom to move around without being confined to the small space of the booth. Plus, working outdoors helps with ventilation and makes cleanup easier. Just make sure to protect your surroundings and choose a spot where overspray won't be an issue. So using an airbrush to prime offers more control, better coverage, and are perfect for those who want a professional finish. You'll need to thin the primer to the right consistency, but the flexibility makes it worth it. First, let's talk about the equipment I'm using. I'm working with the GSI Krios Pro Convoy PS289 airbrush, which is available at Spray Gunner. I'll be doing a review of this airbrush soon, so make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. And a huge shout out to Spray Gunner for making this video possible. If you're looking for premium airbrush gear and paints, make sure to check them out. Links down below. Now let's talk about airbrush primers. There are two main types, water-based and lacquer-based. It's also important to note that there are true water-based paints like Vallejo, but there are some paints like Tamiya which are more alcohol-based. If you prefer to prime with water-based or acrylic primers, be sure to check out the video in the link down below. For this video though, we'll focus on lacquer primers. These are known for their durability and smooth finishes, making them a favorite with Gunpla builders. For this video, I'm using a pre-thinned lacquer primer. Pre-thinned primers are ideal because they save you the hassle of mixing and thinning. If you're using a thicker primer, you may need to thin it to get the right consistency. I'm setting my compressor to 30 psi. I prefer this pressure because I can control the airflow via my airbrush anyways. You can adjust this depending on your airbrush and technique. But for most people, anywhere between 15 to 30 psi is a good starting range. If you're just starting out, I'd recommend around 20 psi. This is low enough to avoid overspray, but still gives you enough power to apply an even coat. For finer details or shading, you can drop it down a bit to 15 psi. If you're doing larger areas, 25 to 30 psi works great. The great thing about pre-thinned primers and paints is you can always just add more into the airbrush cup without having to pause and mix thinner halfway into spraying. Always test your airbrush on a piece of scrap plastic before spraying your model to make sure the flow is smooth and consistent. You want to make sure there's no clogging and that the primer is coming out evenly. Start with short sprays to check the spray pattern. When it comes to airbrushing, light even layers are the key. Keep the airbrush moving in smooth, consistent motions and maintain a distance of about a couple of inches from the surface of the model. Start by spraying in a back and forth motion, covering small sections at a time. Don't forget to clean your airbrush after you're done. It's critical to flush out any leftover primer to avoid clogging the needle and nozzle. Use airbrush cleaner or lacquer thinner depending on the type of primer you used. Now, let's talk about the different colors of primer and when to use them. We'll focus on the most common: black, gray, white, and pink, and I'll explain the purpose of each one. First up, we have black primer. So basically, the darker the primer, the darker the final color will be. Meaning in Gunpla, black primer is usually not used, unless you're painting metallics. Also, painting with black and white underpainting or zenithal painting doesn't work unless you're painting over it with translucent paints. Otherwise, you just wasted your time. Next up, we have gray primer. Gray is a versatile all-around primer. It's neutral, meaning it won't drastically change the hue of your base color. It's also a great middle ground if you're unsure about whether to go dark or light with your primer. It's not too harsh, so it's less likely to affect your final color compared to black or white. Now, let's talk about white primer. White primer is probably the least used primer for Gunpla painting because white paint is generally easier to airbrush than white primer. If you don't know how to use white primer, it might come out too thick. But in miniature painting, white primer is sometimes used for zenithal priming or when using speed paints. Finally, we have pink primer. Pink primer is fantastic for colors like yellow and orange. Pink helps to intensify these warm tones, ensuring they pop and appear more vibrant. Using pink primer gives yellow and orange paints a much more solid, even coverage, and helps the color stand out with a more intense hue. If you want to know more about pink primer and its uses, I have a separate video that I will leave in the description box below. You can check it out after watching this video. Now, you've probably seen primers in other different colors, like blue, red, green, or even dark brown, and wondered, why not just stick to the classic gray? The main reason is time saving. Here's the idea. If you know your Gunpla is going to be mostly a specific color, like green for a Zaku or red for a Sazabi, using a matching colored primer gives you a head start. By priming in a similar color, you'll need fewer coats of paint to achieve a solid finish. So not only are colored primers functional, but they're also efficient. They save time, effort, and even paint, especially if you're working on a large project or doing multiple projects at once. So there you have it. Everything you need to know about priming Gunpla. Whether you're a beginner or a more experienced painter, priming is an essential step. Priming might seem like an extra step, but trust me, it makes all the difference in the final result. So next time, before painting, make sure to properly prime your Gunpla, and you'll definitely see that extra effort reflected in the quality of your build. Again, a big thanks to Spray Gunner for making this video possible. Be sure to check out their selection of airbrushes, paints, and other painting essentials. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon in the next one. Bye!